Hello, learner lovers, and welcome back to another episode of Totally Not Taboo with Tracy. This is where we get to talk about everything about sex and sexuality that is taboo. Today, in our beautiful new home, we have a very, very special guest, but I suppose all our guests are special, but extra special. We're going to be talking about a topic that not many people have even dipped their toe into. We've got Oscar Von Memerty with us. How's it, Oscar? And we're going to be talking about intimacy and disability. So I'm going to hand over to Oscar now. Oscar, it's been, what a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, really? And the moment we started chatting, it was like, yes.
Yes. Yes.
There's been whisperings of having more conversation around intimacy and disabilities. When I attended the WAS conference, which took place in South Africa, which is the World Association for Sexual Health, it was the 25th conference in Cape Town. It was on the agenda, like big time. But still recognizing that there was so much more work to do. Yeah. And then there was another workshop that I attended, a SARS workshop. And again, looking at disability and sexuality and intimacy, massive, and still recognizing that there is not enough awareness.
Exactly. No, 100%.
So, please, would you introduce yourself and give us an idea about who you are and your experiences around sexuality and your disability?
100%. So hello everyone, my name is Oscar. I am 26 years old. I'm a public speaker. I am a performer, a hip-hop dancer, and a dog dad. I love my baby. And yes, I've been performing now 13 years. And I've been doing public speaking for 8 years now. And as you can imagine, I get asked a lot of questions being a little person. So I'm short-statured and I have a rare condition, which means that one of the complications is that I am small. So yeah, as you can imagine, I get asked a lot of questions, and one of them is dating, and how does that work? Being differently abled. And I'm pretty sure just below that question is the question of sexuality and how does that work. And for a large part, I didn't actually have the answers because I just didn't have any experience myself. So I wasn't the right person to ask those kinds of questions. But now that I do actually have some experience, I thought, it's really important to talk about them. So maybe I'll start with my sort of dating history so that people can have an idea. And I might be oversharing here a little bit, but there's a reason behind it.
Well, this is totally not taboo.
No. 100%.
So whatever you're comfortable with, 100%. We want to hear.
100%. So yeah, I'll start like at the beginning for all of us, which is high school. First girlfriend, boyfriend, those kind of stories. For me, high school was a complete desert. I didn't have any girlfriend, no first kiss, nothing. Then when I turned 18, I did what most youngsters did, and I went clubbing quite a bit. And got lucky in the sense that I had a few kisses from different women, but it wasn't, it never went into anything further, and I very quickly realized that clubs aren't great for finding partners. And then when I was 23, I had a kind of sort of relationship. And I say that because we were never really official, but the connection that I had with her was very real for me. And because I never had a girlfriend before, it felt like that's what a relationship could feel like. from the conversation that we had and the sort of flow and ease of the, connection that we had felt very real to me. But she just wasn't quite ready, and when we spoke about it, we realized she wasn't quite ready for a relationship, and I understood that and I respected that. And then when I was 23, 24, I had a casual friends with benefits kind of situation for some time, which was great because I got to explore the sort of sexual part of myself, which I think any young person wants to be able to explore in a healthy and safe way. And that was wonderful because I could, start exploring those elements of myself. And then when I was 25, 26, very recently actually, I had a 6 month relationship, proper girlfriend-boyfriend relationship. And that was wonderful because I could really start to explore, what it means to be in a relationship. Who am I as a person in a relationship? What it means to be able to give affection and have that affection be, appreciated and reciprocated. What it means to be in conflict, because conflict is part of any relationship. It was really wonderful because I could explore so many elements that I think you can't necessarily do by yourself. You need to be in a relationship to be able to see those elements. And we dated for 6 months and we realized we weren't quite right for each other, and we respected that, and we're still friends today. And part of why I wanted to share my history is I wanted to show that, dating as a, disabled person is quite similar to able-bodied people in the sense that we all go through, trials and we have hopes and dreams. We all go through phases. And I want to show that, disability and disabled people do want, intimacy, and they do desire connection. Obviously I can't talk on behalf of all disabled people, but considering that there are about 1 billion disabled people globally, I'm sure 1 or 2 people will be able to relate to these stories in some way. And also just want to show that, even disabled people have, a libido and hormones and, a sex drive. It's not like we're born and that part is just completely, non-existent. It's very much real. So yes.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, and being so candid about it. Excuse me. And as you said, at the end of the day, we are people.
Exactly.
Just because you might be disabled or different, it does not mean that you, as you say, are not born with hormones. Without hormones and a libido and a sex drive. And, while I was reading a lot of the material that you sent me, what was going through my mind is it's not very different from how I feel a lot of the time. Excluded from a certain society because of certain of my circumstances.
Exactly.
So, I think that it's very important that we recognize that it doesn't really matter what our stature, what our physical being, what we look like.
100%.
We all battle in life
100%.
with relationships.
100%.
And we all want the same thing. And what is that? Connection.
No, 100%. And I think that's really what, that narrative sort of needs to change, that differently disabled people are different. I think for a large part we focus too much on the difference and not what makes us, what we actually have in common.
Absolutely.
Because I think people overestimate how much our difference is a part of our lives. And if I think about Oscar, my day to day, my difference is so, such a small part of my life. I mean, most of the time I'm thinking, well, what work do I need to do? What dates would I like to go on? And then like very small slither of part is like, okay, well, the height might be a factor. But for the majority of the time, I'm just Oscar as a person. And I think that's something that we can all sort of be aware of, that we're not as different. We just, we all have a lot in common, actually.
Absolutely, yes. I get that.
Yes.
So tell me about the strange questions that people have asked you.
One thing that actually, having started this journey about a month ago and sort of starting these conversations, I realized that it's not so much that people have questions, because when I chatted to my friends, they all said something very similar, which is, I've never thought about it.
Yes.
So it's not a case of people are thinking about it and having questions. I'm sure some people do, but for a large part, I think people just have never really considered it.
Yes.
And I think a big part of it is because there's a lack of content around that topic. If I think about my own personal journey when I was growing up, I never saw TV ads or TV series or movies or adverts where you had an interabled couple. I never saw sex scenes between an able-bodied person and a disabled-bodied person in movies and series. And by not having that content, you just, unless you're exposed to someone who has a disability, you just never consider it.
Absolutely.
But I do think that the one question that I do get often is, am I able to have kids?
Yes.
And that's the one question that I get all the time.
Oh.
In my case, no, I'm not able to. And it's not because of my condition. It's because I went through chemotherapy and radiation when I was growing up. And, chemotherapy is highly, invasive, which means that essentially I was sterilized.
Right.
So in other words, I get to be intimate for the sake of pleasure, which I think I'm actually pretty cool with, to be honest.
I agree completely.
Whether that statement might change later in life for me, I don't know, but I'm pretty cool with it. So.
Yeah. And there are so many options available.
Yes.
For so many people.
100%.
That weren't really acceptable before.
No.
Look at gay couples, lesbian couples, who wish to have surrogates involved.
Exactly.
And so the world is changing so much.
And even able-bodied,
of course,
parents as well, not
heterosexual, heteronormative couples who wanting to have babies and can't.
Exactly.
So things are so much more. There are so many more options available to so many people.
100%. 100%.
And so, on this topic of identity, you spoke about, in our chat, we spoke about developing an identity and how difficult it is because of what the media doesn't show.
Yes.
And that is, wow, it's, only when you say these things do I think, wow, that's right.
Yes.
We don't see these things. And Sex Education 3, probably the first time I can remember ever having seen a scene where there was an interabled relationship. Is that what we call it? Interabled?
Interabled, yes.
Right. And for anybody who hasn't seen Sex Education, you have to see it. And in the third season, I hate to give away, but there is, since we're speaking about this, there is a scene where this woman is an able-bodied human and she falls for a disabled gent. And the scene was bloody hot.
Yes.
Okay?
I have to admit, like, when I was watching it with my family, and, we were sort of laughing because the whole show, a lot of the sex scenes are quite comical because, it's people bonking.
Yeah.
Whereas, we watched that scene and we realized, actually, like, this is, like, one of the most intimate, erotic scenes of the entire series. And, I got really excited because I was like, wow, like, this is incredible because, like you said, I'm 26 years old and that was the first ever scene that I had seen. So I was researching on the internet to see what people were thinking, and they were all saying the same thing. This is one of the most erotic scenes And I was so excited because 40 million people had seen that scene.
Yeah.
Which meant that 40 million people started asking those questions of, actually, you can have a really fulfilling, intimate life with a disabled-bodied person, because it's not just a, penetrative in-out action that we all told about or it's highlighted. There's so much more to it, and you can get so creative with not having that, conventional roots. I think I thought it was a wonderful scene to see.
Yeah. And then, I'm so happy again we are having this conversation, because these conversations have to be had.
100%.
And there needs to be more media being made so that it can reach the world.
100%.
And that there needs to be more sex scenes that we can be exposed to, and that it's as erotic and as sensual and sexual as what as we see in the porn that we enjoy.
Exactly. No, exactly.
Yeah.
And it also doesn't even have to be, of course those scenes are very important, but it can be other avenues. For example, if you look at adverts, how many, when it's like a product and there's a family, it's always a able-bodied couple. Why not have a interabled couple? Because then again, you're sitting at home with your family, you see that scene, and that's when the conversation starts happening.
Yeah.
You're watching the happy interabled couple with their child, and your children are watching this, and that's when the question starts. Then parents can start being exposed to that as well and start thinking to themselves, okay, how do I actually have these kinds of conversations with my kids? How do I have these kinds of conversations with myself and my friends? So it's really transformative, not just for the disability community, because I think it is important that the disability community start having this belief system that they are capable and, worthy of wanting to have intimate lives and relationships. Because I think, like, I did a bit of research. It's estimated that about 50% of disabled people don't get a regular, healthy, sex life. So it's important for them to think, okay, I'm not too weird and I'm not too different to want to go and explore and try dates and see these things. And then that belief system is equally important for the community at large, because like when you date as a disabled person, when you date an able-bodied person, you're not just dating them. They bringing all the insecurities, the prejudices, the lack of exposure from the families and friends. So that's when the comments can come up, which may be a bit awkward because they've never had to think about it. Whereas if they have been exposed to that kind of content as well, okay, well, we've seen it before, so what's the big deal? So I think that constant exposure is really important.
Yeah. So as you're speaking, there's so much that's going on in my head as well. There's the talking about, how can we educate parents and siblings and friends. There's also things like, so much, but we'll get to each and every one of them. There's as you were speaking, I was thinking about that documentary that I sent to you as well, called Yes, We Fuck. And that was incredibly eye-opening as well. Oh, now remember what I was thinking. And that is, we all need touch. And I, as a single person, desperately need touch too.
100%.
We need to have our touch needs met.
Exactly.
Otherwise we become depressed.
Exactly.
And we have no release of oxytocin.
Exactly.
And we need dopamine. Our pleasures hormones.
100%.
So that documentary, Yes, We Fuck, it's a whole lot of, it's a very, very interesting one, because watching a lot of disabled folk
Yes.
receiving
Yes.
touch
100%.
in so many different ways,
100%.
getting their needs met,
Yes.
getting their pleasures met
Mm.
in all different ways.
Ways.
And I implore everybody to actually download that documentary and look at it. It's some scenes might be shocking, or just, you know, you may not be ready to watch whatever's going on, but especially just to become educated
Yes.
that disabled bodied people have sexual needs.
Yes. 100%.
And need to be touched, need to be
100%.
held, need to
Exactly.
be stroked, need to be kissed.
Yes.
Just like everybody else.
No, 100%. And it's kind of like, you know, to not have this conversation, and it's kind of like always being hungry but never being able to ask for food, and no one's willing to offer you food because they just never, and it's not their fault, it's that they've never been forced to think about it.
Yeah.
They've never thought of the possibilities. And it doesn't even have to be like a sort of, you know, let's try and help them kind of situation. You know, it can be a really, from a point of empowering, you know, interest and you know, having a deep connection with that person as well. And I think that's also another thing why having these kinds of conversations is because I'm sure a lot of able-bodied people maybe, you know, have a fantastic connection with a disabled-bodied person, but because it's not, it's still too taboo. They may feel too shy to want to pursue a relationship with them. Yeah.
Get that. Which brings me also to what's that other one called? Skips my mind.
Love on the Spectrum.
Yes, thank you. Wow, that was amazing as well.
Yes.
Let me hear from you.
Love on the Spectrum is a fantastic series on Netflix where they follow young autistic adults and explore their sort of love lives, and not so much from an intimate point of view, more from a relationship point of view. But I think what was wonderful about how they put this show together is that they did it in such a real, humane way. I've watched other dating shows around people with disability, and it so quickly turns into a freak factor thing. Whereas with this show, it was so real in the sense that it showed their trials. It showed the challenges, but without it being comical. And it really was a format that I think all content creators and media outlets can look to in terms of how this healthy representation to, you know, when it comes to disability and intimacy and relationships. It was so real. And the one thing again that my family and I were discussing when we watched it was there were so many elements where we thought we can so relate to that on every level. You know, the first dates can be so awkward, and what do I do and what do I say? And what I loved about it was because autistic people don't have those sort of social cues, they were just being themselves, and they were just asking, you know, all the awkward questions or having the awkward conversations. They weren't trying to do these sort of social, you know, narratives. And it was just wonderful to see, like, yes, like, why do we all have these sort of initial walls, you know, just connect? But I thought it was really an incredible show from a neurodiverse point of view.
Yeah. And there again, I was watching thinking, that's me.
Yes.
There's nothing different between them and me.
No.
You know, it's just as awkward for me going on a first date as it is for them, and also the difficulty in connecting.
Yes.
And as you said as well earlier on, is finding the similarities between us and not the differences, which I found was very, very powerful as well.
Yes.
So now you sound like you have a very supportive family. It sounds like you have a lot of open conversations.
Yes.
So tell me about the difficulties that some families have, or suggestions and advice you can give.
Right.
Mm.
To be honest, I think for actually in my team, we weren't as open about it, I don't think. And it might be a combination of first child, parents weren't sure how to have the conversation, or it might have been the fact that I had moved to Johannesburg by myself, so, I was never in the presence of my parents to have those kinds of conversations. But now we're very open to it, and we talk about it a lot, and we watch these kinds of shows together, which starts those kinds of conversations. So yeah, I think it is important, whether you are the parent of a disabled child or an able-bodied child, to have those kinds of conversations, because the reality is any one of us can join the disability community at any given time, whether directly or indirectly. You may wake up tomorrow and not have the abilities that you once had. And indirectly, in a sense, say, for example, you have a child, they are at a dating age, they tell you about this wonderful person that they've met, and as it turns out, they have a disability. As a parent, how do you respond to that? Would you have you been exposed to enough content to make you think, actually, this is pretty normal and empowering? You got to ask yourself, how would your friends and your parents react to those kinds of conversations? But I think in terms of parents, I think it's important that regardless of your ability, that you expose yourself to some content that includes disability beyond just a sort of inspirational narrative, and really focus on real issues like, business and relationships and intimacy, all those aspects that make us human. Yeah.
Yeah. As you said, conversations that we need to have with all our children.
Yes.
And again, I go back to the fact that depending on how comfortable parents are with their own sexuality will depend on how comfortable they are having conversations with their children.
100%. And on that point, I think it's not so much just the parents having to, educate and have those conversations with their child. I think a lot of parents need help.
Of course.
They don't know how to have conversations around disabilities, because I've seen so many times I'll be out in public, a child's really intrigued by me, which is natural, they're allowed to be, and the parent will be like, oh, let's just say hello, whatever, but they won't be willing to say hello to me themselves.
The parents?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you lead by example. So it's not just kids, it's everyone that needs to be empowered in some way.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So, right, I need to ask you about, I want to ask you about your motivational speaking, but I want to leave that. Okay, let's do it now.
Yes.
Tell me about your motivational speaking. What is that all about?
So I do public speaking, and I combine it with hip-hop dance. So I do a bit of a speech and hip-hop dance, and I share my sort of history, my medical history, the journey that I've taken. I did take a bit of a break for about 3 years. But now that I'm at this sort of new stage in my life, I want to start having these conversations around inclusion in every aspect, whether it's media, and how we can drive those sort of inclusive narratives. Because I think media is very powerful. Media provides people with narratives on how to engage with one another. And also provides narrative of what's normal and what's not, depending on how consistently you are exposed to something. So, broadening those conversations around inclusivity of disabled people in the workplace, all these topics that we spoke about. So as a public speaker, I'm now definitely exploring those other avenues of topics as a young man who's been in the industry for a long time, and realizing there's a lot of holes or opportunities that we can look into in South Africa.
Yeah, but we definitely need a lot more education.
Yes.
Around how to approach people with disabilities.
Yes. And it's not even like from an educational point of view. It's simply a case of, or I believe it's a case of just having disabled people in the same room as able-bodied people, creating those storylines with people engaging. Because I think often when we think of disabilities, we think, 1 month awareness campaign, these are the steps that you do X, Y, Z, and then it's boom, it's gone.
Not enough.
Whereas if you just simply have like an advert where a disabled person is engaging with an able-bodied person, you subconsciously just taken that actually this is normal. You don't have to be afraid if you're an able-bodied person, and you don't have to be defensive if you're a disabled-bodied person. And I think it's that shift from education, activism to just simple inclusion, which I think could be quite powerful.
And what has made you so approachable, so understanding, so empathic, to understand that people are fearful or have these blocks?
I think if anything it's my difference, because as a disabled person you're very aware of your situations, and for example I know that I'm Oscar as a person, but when I meet people for the first time they may still just see the disability at first. So I think majority of disabled people have the ability to put themselves in the other person's shoes to try and make that interaction as easy as possible for them.
Yes.
And not to say that other able-bodied people aren't, but there's a lot of awkwardness. So I think it's something that most disabled bodied people know how to do, because they have to do it on a regular basis. They need to be vulnerable to say, actually, I need help. Can you reach this for me? Actually, I know you made a mistake and you thought I was a child, but I'm not. Whatever. And it's because we continuously have those interactions. We know how to, and we know how to, like I mentioned, be vulnerable in those cases.
Sure. I have the most respect for you in your attitude, because you could be angry, resentful, bitter, A, about your life, and B, about the way people treat you, but yet you are so understanding, and you just get it. You get other people and their reactions towards you.
I understand that it's not necessarily their fault. Of course, you have some people who are just nasty. But for majority of people, they haven't been exposed. I know my friends see me as a person because they've been exposed to me enough, and they've. That's another thing. If you give people enough time, they start seeing the person and not the disability. And that's something that I've also realized, that often it takes 1, 2, 3, 4 encounters with the same person for them to start easing and realizing, actually, it's okay. I don't need to be super respectful and super this and super that. I can just relax and have a normal conversation with Oscar. So yeah.
Amazing. But I want to get back to sexuality.
Yes.
So, tell me about inspiration porn.
Yes. So that's a term that I think is circulating in the disability community, and it's a sense that, like we mentioned, when it comes to media, that one narrative is always inspirational. If we are included, it's always to share our story, hopefully inspire some individuals, and then gone. And it kind of sort of the same way porn can objectify women or men, whichever. The same way that inspiration can, because you're just known as an object of inspiration.
Right.
And that's why I think it's termed inspiration porn, because it's just one element that's repeatedly, showcased. So which I think, that's where the term inspiration porn comes from.
So give me an example. Make it practical.
Yes. So, for example, if I were to, for most interviews, it's always, I know how the story's going to go. I come on, introduce myself, tell my tale of my medical history, how I overcame the obstacles, and then that's it.
Right.
So that's, and then also, and then another example is storylines where disabled people are included. Is often there's a main character, and the disabled actor is there to provide a role of lively inspiration, and that's it. And then there's no other elements that is included.
Okay, so in inspiration porn, are you saying that the disabled person would be the object of inspiration for erotic pleasure, or?
Oh no, inspiration porn, nothing to do anything with.
I have a completely different understanding in terms of like, okay.
No, it's nothing to do with like inspiring and sexuality. It's nothing to do with that. It's just a term that is used to describe how limited our inclusion is.
I understand now. So because my head is always in the gutter. now
that you mention, I'm thinking, well, how would that work?
Yeah, so, in terms of kinks and things like that, I was exposed on a sexual awareness re-evaluation course to a whole lot of media. And it was taken, was it 3 days? Oh, I'm embarrassed. Or was it 1 full day or 2 full days? I can't even remember. But it was for us social sexuality, sexual educators, sexologists, people working in the industry, to have an opportunity to update our information and our to reevaluate our biases, our judgments, our attitudes towards everything sexuality, what's new in the world, what's trending and so on.
100%.
And we were bombarded with a lot of audio-visual material, and it was very interesting, from kink to, and everything that comes under kink, to watching homosexual porn, gay porn, lesbian porn, even disabled porn, everything.
Yes.
And so what comes to mind is watching little people having sex and how that can be a turn on for a lot of people. Kink porn. So that was what I was thinking of, as inclusion porn. Well, what the term is inspiration porn.
No, exactly. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, I think in those cases it can also be like, they can kind of be edging on sort of fetishism, which is one thing. And of course, some people do have a fetish, and that's not, I hope that's like not something that people, associate, that if you are attracted to a disabled person or a little person, whatever, that you need to have a fetish. I don't think that is, I don't think that is the case. You can just be attracted to the person because you like the person.
I think it was used as a shock factor for us, and to see our reactions.
100%.
100%. So that was a very interesting thing. Also, what I was wondering about is, so we spoke about the sexual identity, we spoke about the series and the documentaries that also came up. And then what I also want to know is about the questions that you get asked as a carer and a caregiver, and how that we also spoke about having kids. If you can talk a little bit about that. And then I have another question about what happens if your partner does all of a sudden become disabled.
100%.
Okay.
So the question that I would sort of mindset I had was, say for example, you are a able-bodied person and you realize you would like a potential relationship with someone who is disabled, and naturally you're going to have questions, and one of the questions is like, how much care work would I have to do for my partner? And reality is, whether you with someone able-bodied or disabled, you have to be a carer. You have to care about their emotions, their boundaries, their fears, all those elements. If you're worried from, say for example, a physical care point of view, I mean, I'm not in the case of someone who's severely disabled, so I can't necessarily explain how that would work. But keep in mind that that person has lived their whole lives without you before you arrived. And it's not something you necessarily have to worry about, because they've got most likely have their habits, their routines, their systems. And you might actually be more frustrated that, you want to help that person, but they're very protective of their independence. It's quite funny, because often my friends want to help me and I point blank shoot them down. And I can't understand why, and it's just because for me, my independence is very important. So, yeah, I think if you have worries about those kind of, if you have that kind of question, then it's important just to chat to your potential partner how that would work. But just know that they probably have been thinking 100 times the night before, how can I make this as normal as possible for both of us? Yeah, and then what was the other question you had?
What if your partner suddenly becomes disabled?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, if your partner suddenly becomes disabled, I think it all depends on. I actually don't know, because I'm not in that situation. I can't, I can't say, because again, it all depends on what's your understanding of disabilities. Are you, again, exposed to enough content for you to realize that actually this is not the end of the world? I mean, yes, it's going to take a bit of shifting and understanding. So again, it all depends on what's your personal perception of disability, and are you willing to navigate that new world?
Yeah, because I have become aware of a situation of a gay couple, and they were both able-bodied people, and then this guy got some kind of disease that ransacked his entire body, and overnight became a quadriplegic. And this has really shaken up the relationship as a whole.
Exactly.
And for the able-bodied person, just in terms of putting myself in their shoes, I can imagine, and this I don't know for sure, is there's a lot of panic and fear, loss. And then again, obviously for the disabled person, it's also panic, fear, loss, question marks just around who are we? We were this, now we're that. And what about our sex life?
Exactly.
What is going to happen? That is for me the base on which relationships are built.
100%. I think that kind of reaction is normal for any situation, whether it's a financial situation. You're going to be shaken up in some way. I think what's important is to admit, okay, this is the space that we're in. Now let's try and navigate the way out. So it's not just fear constantly, it's now new growth. And you might find that, okay, well, what's sex going to be like now? That's something that, through that journey, you might find new parts of yourself that you've never considered before. Questions like, for example, some people might be like, well, what's it like having sex with a disabled person? You don't know until you do it. until you both agree that's something that you want to do, you don't know. And it's the same for anybody. You know, if you think what's sex going to be like for someone else who's able-bodied, you don't know until you do it. So I think the main thing is to, of course, react naturally, like the grief, the fear, but then think, okay, well, this has happened. So now how do we explore together this new part?
And with a lot of support.
Yes.
A lot
100%.
of love, a lot of counseling,
yes.
a lot of therapy,
Yes.
So, Oscar, this has been an amazing, amazing conversation. Is there a parting message you'd like to send our audience?
I think the main thing is do yourself a favor and go and look to these other elements that all these series that we spoke about. So Love on the Spectrum, watch it, make notes, have those conversations with your family, your friends, you know, start having those conversations of, you know, am I really informed when it comes to disability? Am I open-minded? And then also if you are someone who's struggling with disability, just know that you know, don't be fearful of wanting a relationship. Put yourself out there. It may take a little longer than for most people, but there's always possibility. And if you're an able-bodied person and you are attracted to someone who's disabled, just know that it's not weird. It's normal. It's healthy, and you can have a fantastic, intimate, and real, fulfilling relationship.
Beautiful message. And I look very forward to more work that you and I can do together.
I'm super excited.
Yeah. We need to educate and educate.
Yes.
And educate.
100%.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much for being with me today. So tune in next week for another episode on Totally Not Taboo with Tracy. And go well and go sexy.